The locksmith turned the dial one final time. Click. The safe door swung open. Officer Martinez shined his flashlight inside and froze. Officer Sullivan, standing behind him, leaned in to look. Neither of them spoke for a solid 10 seconds. They were in a small bedroom in a house on Maple Street, Ohio. The house belonged to Walter Hayes, 92, who'd been found deceased 3 days earlier by his mailman. Natural causes, heart failure. No family, no next of kin listed anywhere. Standard procedure was to secure the residence, catalog any valuables, try to locate relatives. The safe had been bolted to the floor of the bedroom closet, hidden behind hanging coats that probably hadn't been worn in 20 years. Martinez reached in carefully and pulled out the first item, a manila folder. Thick, old. The cover had faded red letters stamped across it. Top secret. Below that, a date, 1944. Sullivan, a 20-year veteran and former Army himself, exhaled slowly. Stop. Don't open that. We need to call the FBI right now. 2 days later, FBI agent Rebecca Torres sat at Walter Hayes' kitchen table with the contents of the safe spread in front of her. She'd driven 3 hours from the Columbus field office. Beside her sat Officer Sullivan and a DoD civilian named Robert Chen, a military records specialist who'd flown in from Washington. Torres had already photographed everything. Now they were going through it piece by piece. The folder contained military after-action reports, grid coordinates, personnel rosters, and a handwritten statement dated June 10, 1944, signed by someone named Thomas Riley, Sergeant, 101st Airborne Division. But what had stopped everyone cold was the letter on top. Handwritten on lined notebook paper. Recent, maybe a few months old based on the ink. It read, "To whoever finds this, my name is Walter Hayes. I am 92 years old and dying. What's in this safe is a confession. I need you to send it to the White House, not to punish anyone. Just so the truth is known, please." Chen, the DoD specialist, was reading through the 1944 after-action report. His face had gone pale. This is documentation of a war crime." Torres looked up. "What kind?" "Execution of prisoners of war, June 8, 1944, Normandy. 8 German soldiers surrendered to an American patrol. According to this report filed by Sergeant Riley, the Germans were killed in combat. But..." Chen pulled out another document from deeper in the folder. "This is a second statement, also by Riley, but this one's handwritten, not typed. Different. It says the Germans surrendered. White flag, hands up, and the Americans shot them anyway." "Why would someone file 2 different reports?" Sullivan asked. Chen shook his head. "The typed one is official. It went into the record books. This handwritten one..." He turned it over. On the back, in different handwriting, "Tommy wrote the lie. This is what really happened. W.H." Torres pulled out a stack of photographs. 8 men in German uniforms, hands raised. 4 American soldiers standing in front of them, weapons lowered. One of the Americans was clearly a young version of the man whose house they were sitting in. She'd seen Walter Hayes' driver's license photo. Same face, 70 years older. Walter Hayes was one of the 4, Torres said quietly. They spent the next hour going through everything. There were more documents. Personnel records showing that Thomas Riley had died in 1987. Marcus Webb, another name that appeared repeatedly, had died in 2001. That left one other name, James Norton. Chen ran him through the database. Still alive. 94 years old. Address in Fort Myers, Florida. But the most disturbing find was at the bottom of the safe. A journal. Leather-bound, thick, maybe 500 pages, every single page filled with handwriting. The leather was worn smooth from handling, the edges of pages dog-eared and stained. Torres opened it carefully to the first page. The date at the top, written in fountain pen that had faded to brown. January 1st, 1950. The entry read, 6 years since it happened. 6 years since I became a murderer. I can't stop thinking about them, their faces, the way they looked at us when they realized we were going to shoot them anyway. I looked up one of their names today at the library, Klaus Fischer. Found a casualty record. He was 17 years old, from Munich, had a mother and 2 sisters. That's all I know right now, but I'm going to find out more. I have to, because if I don't remember them as real people, then I'm no better than Tommy. They deserve to be more than just bodies in a field. Torres flipped forward through the years. The entries were relentless. January 1951, researching German phone directories. June 1952, learning German at night school. March 1954, working double shifts to save money for a plane ticket. The obsession was total. Every spare moment, every spare dollar, dedicated to one purpose: finding the families of the 8 men he'd killed. And then, starting in 1995, a different kind of entry. The handwriting was shakier now, older. Today, I met Klaus Fischer's mother. Her name is Greta. She is 83 years old and lives in a small apartment in Munich. I knocked on her door. When I told her I was an American soldier who knew what happened to Klaus, she let me in. We sat in her kitchen. There was a photograph of Klaus on the wall, a boy in a German uniform trying to look brave. I told her everything. I told her Klaus didn't die fighting. I told her he surrendered. I told her we shot him anyway while his hands were in the air. She cried for 20 minutes. I didn't move. I didn't apologize. I just let her cry. Finally, she asked me why I came. I told her because Klaus deserved to have someone remember him as more than just a casualty number. Because he was 17 and he had a mother who loved him, and he died afraid, and that matters. She didn't forgive me. She told me to leave. But as I was walking out, she said, "Thank you for telling me the truth. His father died never knowing what really happened. At least now I know." I visit Klaus's grave tomorrow. Then I start looking for the next family. The entries continued, name after name, family after family, each one documented in painful detail. Friedrich's widow, who threw Walter out. Hans's brother, who shook his hand and said, "You did a terrible thing, but you're the only one who cared enough to tell us." Wilhelm's daughter, who was only 3 when her father died and who broke down when Walter showed her a photograph of her father with his hands up. The journal documented 47 years of this. 47 years of Walter Hayes tracking down every family, flying to Germany every summer, spending his savings and his vacation time to visit graves and tell truths that no one else wanted told. The last entry was dated 2 months before Walter's death. I am too old to travel anymore. My heart is failing. But I have kept my promise. All 8 families know the truth now. Some forgave me. Some didn't. I don't blame them. I just needed them to know their sons and fathers and brothers didn't die as numbers. They died as Klaus and Friedrich and Hans and Wilhelm and Otto and Heinrich and Josef and Karl, and I carry their names with me. I always will. Agent Torres closed the journal, looked at Chen. We need to verify all of this. The incident, the soldiers involved, everything. Chen nodded. I can pull the official records. But if what's in this journal is accurate, this is one of the most extensively documented confessions to a war crime I've ever seen. 3 days later, Torres sat across from James Norton in his small apartment in Fort Myers. The old man looked like a strong breeze might knock him over. But his mind was sharp. He'd agreed to talk without hesitation. "I've been waiting for this visit for 78 years, James said quietly. His hands shook as he poured water from a pitcher. Walter called me about 6 months ago, said he was dying, said he'd finally finished visiting all the families, asked me if I wanted to join him for one last trip to Germany. I said no, I'm a coward. Always have been." Torres had her notebook out. "Mr. Norton, I need you to tell me what happened on June 8, 1944. James closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was steady but emotionless, like he'd rehearsed this testimony in his head 1,000,000 times and was finally saying it out loud. "We were a 4-man team. Me, Walter Hayes, Marcus Webb, and Tommy Riley. Tommy was our sergeant. We'd been fighting for 2 days straight since the beach. No sleep, no food, just adrenaline and fear. We'd been ordered to clear a farmhouse outside Saint Laurent. Intelligence said there might be a German observation post. We went in fast, weapons up, expecting a fight. But when we kicked in the door, we found 8 German soldiers inside. Just kids, really. Some of them looked younger than us. They surrendered immediately, threw down their weapons, hands in the air. One of them was holding a white pillowcase, a surrender flag. He paused, took a sip of water with shaking hands. Tommy's best friend had died on the beach 2 days before. D-Day, a kid named Eddie from Brooklyn. Tommy watched it happen, watched Eddie bleed out on Omaha Beach calling for his mother. So when we got those 8 Germans with their hands up, something in Tommy broke. He said, "We're not taking prisoners. Not after Eddie. Not after the beach." I tried to argue. I said we had orders. Walter begged him to stop. Literally begged. But Tommy pulled his service pistol and shot the first German in the head. Just like that. The kid dropped. The other 7 started screaming. Tried to run. Tommy shot 2 more. Then he turned to us and said either we shoot 2 or he shoots us and then shoots them anyway. He meant it. I could see it in his eyes. So we shot. "So you shot them?" James nodded. "I shot 1. Marcus shot 1. Walter shot 2. The last 2. He was crying the whole time. Tommy wrote it up as combat kills. Nobody questioned it, and we never spoke about it again. Not once in 78 years. Until Walter started tracking down the families." Torres leaned forward. "Did you know what Walter was doing? The trips to Germany?" "He told me in 1995, called me out of nowhere, said he'd found the first family, asked if I wanted to come with him to meet them. I told him he was crazy, that it was over, that we should let it stay buried. He said he couldn't. He said those 8 men deserved to have their real story told. So he went alone. And he kept going. Every single family. It took him 30 years to find them all." "Why didn't you ever report this yourself?" James looked at her with eyes that had stopped expecting forgiveness decades ago. "Because I'm a coward. Walter was the brave one. He's the one who couldn't live with it. The rest of us just buried it and moved on. But Walter carried it every day. And when he knew he was dying, he made sure the truth would come out." Agent Torres submitted her report to the Department of Justice 4 weeks later. It included everything: the confession, the journal, the testimony from James Norton, verification from DOD that the incident had occurred and that the official report had listed it as combat deaths, and copies of letters Torres had tracked down, letters from German families to Walter Hayes, some angry, some grateful, all confirming that he had visited them and told them the truth. Her recommendation was unusual. She wrote, "Prosecution is not possible or appropriate. 3 of 4 participants are deceased. The surviving participant, James Norton, is 94 and cooperating fully. However, I recommend this case be forwarded to the White House as requested by Walter Hayes. His 4 decades of seeking accountability represent an extraordinary act of conscience that deserves acknowledgement." The report climbed the ladder. DOJ to Secretary of Defense to National Security Council. 6 weeks after Walter's death, a statement was released from the White House. Brief, professional. It acknowledged the events of June 8, 1944, acknowledged that a war crime had occurred, acknowledged that Walter Hayes had spent decades seeking to make amends. The final line read, "In the fog of war, we are all capable of terrible acts. What distinguishes us is what we do in the decades after." The statement made headlines for exactly 48 hours. Cable news ran it. Historians debated it. Veterans groups argued about it. Some said Walter Hayes was a hero for coming forward. Others said he was a traitor for exposing American war crimes. And then, like everything else in the modern news cycle, it disappeared beneath the next crisis, the next scandal, the next thing people were supposed to be outraged about. But in Germany, 8 families received official letters from the U.S. government. Letters on Department of Defense letterhead, signed by the Secretary himself. Letters explaining what had really happened to their relatives on June 8, 1944. Letters that included copies of the after-action reports, the photographs, and Walter Hayes's journal entries about visiting their families. Some of the families wrote back with anger. Letters that Agent Torres read and filed. Letters that called Walter a murderer, called America a criminal nation, demanded justice that would never come. But others wrote back with something unexpected. Gratitude. Torres kept these letters in a separate file. One of them, from the granddaughter of Klaus Fischer, read, "For 80 years, my family believed my grandfather died fighting Americans. We were told he was a soldier, that he died in combat, fighting to the last. This is what we told ourselves to make sense of his death. The truth, that he surrendered and was murdered, that he was 17 years old with his hands in the air, is terrible. It is the worst thing we could have learned. But at least it is the truth. And Mr. Hayes, who could have stayed silent, who could have taken this secret to his grave, chose instead to spend his final decades honoring my grandfather's memory by telling his real story. I cannot forgive what he did. I will never forgive what he did, but I can respect what he tried to do after. He tried to give my grandfather his humanity back, and for that, I thank him." Walter Hayes's funeral was held on a cold November morning. No family, no friends, just Officer Sullivan, who'd found the safe, Agent Torres, who'd investigated, and a minister who'd never met Walter but agreed to say a few words. They were lowering the casket when a car pulled up. A rental. German plates. An elderly woman got out, maybe 75, moving slowly with a cane. She walked to the graveside without acknowledging anyone, just stood there, silent, as they lowered Walter into the ground. When it was over, she pulled out a single white flower and placed it on the fresh dirt, then turned to leave. Sullivan caught up with her at her car. "Excuse me, did you know Mr. Hayes?" The woman turned. Her English was accented but clear. "He killed my grandfather, June 8, 1944. My grandfather was 17. His name was Klaus." She looked back at the grave. "Mr. Hayes came to my grandmother in 1995, told her everything. Every year after that, until she died, he came to my grandfather's grave and left flowers. After my grandmother died, he came to me. For 24 years, every summer, he would stand at the grave and cry." "Did you forgive him?" Sullivan asked. The woman was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I respected him. He didn't have to tell us. He didn't have to spend half his life trying to make it right. Most men would have stayed silent. He couldn't. So I came here to say goodbye to the only person who kept my grandfather's memory alive. Not as a number, as Klaus." She got in the car and drove away. Sullivan stood there until the rental disappeared. Then he walked back to the grave, picked up the white flower. There was a small card attached. Just 3 words in neat handwriting. "Ruhe in Frieden. Rest in peace." Officer Sullivan kept the safe, took it home, put it in his own garage. Used it to store his father's things, military medals, discharge papers, a folded flag, and a copy of Walter's letter, the one that said, "Send this to the White House." Because some confessions wait a lifetime to be heard. Some guilt is carried until the very end. And sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is spend 50 years refusing to let the truth die, even when the truth condemns him. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, join us. Subscribe to Echoes of Valor. Because every soldier, every victim, every burden carried across decades deserves to be remembered.